Hi scholars, I missed you guys. So, if we remember when we were doing Read Aloud, we were talking about character traits. Character traits is telling us what a character is like. So, when we're trying to find out those character traits, we are using text evidence. So, that's what's actually in the book. And then what we already know. Remember, we learned a really fancy word for what we already know. If you guessed schema, you're right. We learned the word schema. Schema means what we already know. Now remember, we're also paying attention to the text evidence. So for character traits, we should be looking at the characters, thoughts, actions, and words. We're looking at the characters, thoughts, actions, and words. All right, now you're going to listen to the story, and I'll ask questions throughout the first part of our book that we're reading today, Chrysanthemum.
Chrysanthemum by Kevin Henkes. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' lives. "She's perfect," said her mother. "Absolutely," said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect. "Her name must be everything she is," said her mother. "Her name must be absolutely perfect," said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew. And when she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved her name. "I love my name." She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner. And she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written with ink on an envelope. She loved the way it looked when it was written with icing on her birthday cake. And she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself with her fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect.
Now we're talking about our main character in the book that we learned a little bit about so far, Chrysanthemum. And scholars, on the page that we just read, I'm wondering, what character trait would we use to describe Chrysanthemum? So remember, I'm going to make an inference. That means that I'm using text evidence and my schema, or what I already know, to find out my character trait. So, I'm thinking Chrysanthemum is talking about her name. So, in our text evidence, so I have TE right here for text evidence, I know that Chrysanthemum loves how her name is written on an envelope, loves how her name is on a cake, and loves writing her name in her big orange crayon. Then I also know that she has I also know in my schema that I know when somebody talks a lot about something, that might mean that they're proud of it. So I'm going to infer, using my text evidence and the schema, that the character trait that we have right now for Chrysanthemum is that she's proud because her name makes her happy and she loves it and she loves talking about it.
And then she started school. On the first day, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. She ran all the way to school. "Hooray!" said Chrysanthemum. "School!" But when Mrs. Chud took roll call, everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. "It's so long," said Joe. "It scarcely fits your name tag," said Rita, pointing. "I'm named after my grandmother," said Victoria. "You're named after a flower." Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and informed Mrs. Chud that Chrysanthemum's name was spelled with 13 letters. "That's exactly half as many letters as there are in the entire alphabet," Victoria explained. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria," said Mrs. Chud. "Now put your head down." "If I had a name like yours, I'd change it," Victoria said as the students lined up to go home. "I wish I could," thought Chrysanthemum miserably. "Welcome home," said her mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "My name is too long. It scarcely fits on my name tag. And I'm named after a flower." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "Your name is beautiful." "And precious, and priceless, and fascinating, and winsome," said her father. "It's everything you are," said her mother. "Absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt much better after her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with ketchup, and an evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that her name was Jane. It was an extremely pleasant dream. Next morning, Chrysanthemum wore her most comfortable jumper. She walked to school as slowly as she could. She dragged her feet in the dirt. "Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum," she wrote. "She even looks like a flower," said Victoria as Chrysanthemum entered the playground. "Let's pick her," said Rita, pointing. "Let's smell her," said Joe. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and said, "A chrysanthemum is a flower. It lives in a garden with worms and other dirty things." "Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria," said Mrs. Chudd. "Now put your head down."
Okay, scholars, that concludes today's read aloud. We're going to finish Chrysanthemum tomorrow. But I want to leave you with some ending, culminating questions. So questions that we end to think on. So I want you to think, what character traits does Chrysanthemum have throughout the story so far? Remember, scholars, when we're trying to figure out our character traits, we're using text evidence. And that text evidence is from what we notice about the character's thoughts, actions, and words. And then we're using that with our schema. And our schema is what we already know. And then those two things together make an inference about the character traits that we noticed. So we're trying to figure out character traits for Chrysanthemum. I want you to think about the text evidence and your schema that support you with the character traits that you come up with today. I'm going to leave some notes on character traits that I noticed during my reading of Chrysanthemum. And then I know that we're going to learn so many more tomorrow when we finish the story. All right, can't wait for tomorrow's video.